Thanks for joining this session. We were just joking, it's post-lunch, so if you need to grab coffee, feel free. But we're going to go over DocLib. I want to cover a few different things with you guys. I've done this a similar session in the past, and I wasn't sure who was going to be attending, so I didn't necessarily want to recap the same things that I did on the last one. So this time I decided to go a little bit deeper into the product side, show a little bit more of a demo from what I've shown in the past. But before I jump into that, I wanted to cover a few things, sort of why we looked at developing DocLib for the QAD space. We being the company that I have been blessed to steward at this stage. I wasn't around with the company when they first developed the solution in an official capacity. But so I'll cover some of the challenges that we look to solve with DocLib, with AP automation, sort of an overview of what our tool looks like, the workflows that we deploy for QAD customers, and then dive into a brief demo of 3, maybe 4 of like the top things that customers look at. One being three-way match automation. It's kind of a hot topic when you talk to accounting teams within QAD of how do we eliminate all of these, backlog of invoices that we're waiting on receipts for. We're waiting on someone to look at a discrepancy. We've got a tax issue, or the PO price is wrong. There's all sorts of problems that could come, and it really burdens a lot of AP departments. So first one being three-way matching. Second one being more of the reporting side, kind of getting visibility into what's out there. If depending on your level of familiarity with your accounting departments, most people are sort of using a spreadsheet or their email inbox or their memory to keep track of sort of what's out there. And it can be pretty burdensome, especially come period close, month or year-end closing. An audit of any sort can be a real challenge. So I'll touch on that on the reporting side. And then the third thing I wanted to touch on was the actual transaction creation in QAD. So that's one thing that we kind of hang our hat on as a solution, is we are the recommended solution in QAD for AP automation. So if you were to talk with your QAD reps, talk with your QAD resources, they would point you towards DocLib. I guess if they don't, let me know, but no, but I'm pretty sure, we're still at that level. We've been in the space, as Gary mentioned, for a long time, since the early 90s. And then this particular solution was developed in the 2000s, early 2000s, for QADers. Like, we were a document management tool, document library, DocLib, for a number of years, and then started to see the trend in the documents being stored, being around finance, being around the financial processes. And then AP is sort of where we were guided by our customers towards the squeakiest wheel, if you will, of the most inefficient process that they were managing those documents. So then we built the workflow, and then in 2014, 16, we really made that sort of the flagship of what this tool is about. There's a number of other things that we could talk about. If you talk to some of our customers here, they use it for other areas of their business, and other document storage capabilities. But this is really what I want to focus on, and what QAD focuses on with us is the AP automation. Before I jump into more about the tool, Heidi actually was virtual on the last Midwest user group to kind of give a customer success story for us. She's actually here. If you look for the blue hair, she's the only one with blue hair in the conference. It's kind of convenient. But she works for Magna, big automotive company. They've got a bunch of divisions. They have a very decentralized model in their business. So 3 of the 4 businesses using QAD use DocLib for AP automation, and the 4th is in the process of going live with QAD and plans to work with us later on, I believe. If one of you are in the room, you can let me know. But we're looking at doing that with them later on. But anyway, she has been sort of this the primary person at Magna that's helped evaluate the tool for these different divisions and help determine how it will fit into their process, and then also support the implementations for each of those areas. So she's got a wealth of knowledge, and I won't necessarily read the slide for you guys. We'll make that available to you, but and then we also have the recording of her customer story, I think on our YouTube channel. Is that right? Yeah. So if you wanted to hear a little bit from her, or hit her up at the conference here. Great. Any questions so far on what I've laid out? Good to go? Okay. All right, so I'm going to dive in, so sort of taking a bird's eye view of the tool and then start to narrow our focus as we go. And I am not super formal in my presentation, so I would like to, if there's questions that are coming up, if you want to shoot a hand up, that you don't feel like you're going to interrupt me or throw me off, like I can absolutely answer questions as we go. And then if there's something that I'm going to cover down the line, just feel free to ask a question. I'll let you know if we're going to cover that in a minute. But to start off, I like to use this pinwheel to just give a very broad stroke view of the process. One of the reasons why, just as a quick aside, I started to use this was because as I presented DocLib to companies, AP seems and sounds simple from the outside, but once you start to get into the nuts and bolts of it, there's a lot of things that are going on in that process. So I like to bring this like fuller picture to start, just to make sure that we're hitting all the buckets, even though we might focus on like one thing in step 4, in the demo. It doesn't necessarily mean that we, didn't touch on or automate these other areas. So that's how I'll start off. So starting at number 1, bringing documents into your business. The primary method that we're seeing companies receiving these supplier invoices is via email. So primary way that we're, starting off this automated process is by capturing those documents directly off of email automatically to initiate our process. There's a variety of other ways to get the document into the system, but email seems to be 80–90%. You could drag and drop into a folder and automatically pull up. You could scan and directly to the tool, fax, whatever you do. We can usually cover that. So that's step 1. Step 2 is indexing. So if you're familiar with OCR or optical character recognition, it's a whole industry or sub-industry within software that is basically, if you think about like in your personal life, taking a picture of a check, and if your bank app reads that check, that's what OCR is. So it's taking the unstructured data of a PDF or a picture and bringing structure to that data, figuring out what is actually on that document. So in terms of a supplier invoice, supplier name, invoice number, PO number, things of that nature. There's a whole slew of keywords, but that's what that second step is. Now going a step deeper in OCR, if you're familiar with the industry, it's come a long way over the past, probably decade and a half, and even more recently over the past 5 years with the introduction of AI. AI is a great use case for AI because it can, an AI neural network or the model could read that document and start to make sense of that document, especially as the volume increases in that model. So it's a great application. We saw that a couple years ago of that particular application of AI in our tool set. So we built out our own OCR tool called DocIndex that does just that, document indexing. So there's no need for templates. There's no need for training the model. We have a dedicated person on our team that trains our AI model and monitors that. I talk a little bit about AI drift and how if you're not careful about how you're training, it could exponentially go in the wrong direction. So you want to make sure that that's really stewarded well. So that's step 2, just getting the keywords off the documents. Long-winded way of saying that. But steps 3 and 4 are really the heavy lifting of the tool. And that's where you'll see the 30, 40 plus real-time integration points to QAD, and where your AP team will really see the benefits. And then in turn, management will see the benefits of the reporting against what we're automating there. But that's everything from, for a no PO-based invoice, GL coding and approval. For a PO-based invoice, the three-way match, approvals on discrepancies, and then you have all the validations and verifications that you can think of. Is this a true supplier? Is the PO open? Sorry. That is a customer call, but if you become a customer, I'll answer. But yeah, so where was I? So we're looking at taxes, looking at trailer charges, all those sorts of things in that workflow. With the ultimate culmination of that workflow in creating a transaction in QAD. I mentioned this in Andy's session too. I'll just take an aside here real quick before I mention this step 4 too. There's a whole slew of applications on both the front end and back end of this tool that I would encourage you to look at. We partner with ISS Group and a variety of others for procurement automation, supplier onboarding, payment tools. What we're really focused on is narrowing down very specifically on the AP tool. So with that QAD transaction automation, that's creating the supplier invoice or creating the voucher in QAD. Any version, EB2, MFG Pro, back in the early 90s, all the way up through to AUX, whatever you're running, we can integrate to. It's the same platform that integrates to all those versions. So a lot of our customers will look at if they're moving, SE to EE or SE to AUX or EE to AUX, they'll sometimes look at implementing DocLib as a way to lessen the burden on accounting as well when they look at that upgrade. So there's a variety of things that we could talk about depending on your situation. So that's creating the transaction in QAD. Steps 5 and 6, they're less so steps, things that I like to mention. I mean, 5 is, we save all the documents off into our document library in DocLib. And those are all accessible. They're all linked together. They're all linked to the workflow. And then in the process audit or version controls, you have sort of who did what when with those documents, and have that all time stamped out with the linked documents. Very helpful when it comes time for an internal or external audit, or if you're just trying to drive a little bit more accountability in one of the departments, whether it's purchasing, approvals, AP, it's very helpful to have all that data. And all that's reportable. You can report against any component there. So again, that's a very high level, broad brush stroke of what the DocLib AP process looks like. Any questions on that so far? Anybody brave enough to break the ice on that? Questions?
When you secure the documents in the database, is there metadata too?
Yes. Yeah. Search info? Exactly. And that's actually one point I did not mention was the document indexing with QAD connection. That's things like the site. That's not going to be on your invoice or the entity or the currency that you have set up for that supplier. Is that supplier taxable? Those sorts of those are technically maybe not all metadata fields for that invoice, but relevant data that would be important to save off and be utilized in the workflow. So to that point, yes.
What about for when you're doing the ingestion piece on the document capture and things like that? Does it go in the AI read? Does it go through and look for duplicates?
Yes. Yep. Perfect segue. Thank you. So this is a little bit of a expanded view of what we saw sort of in steps 1 through 4 in that pinwheel. But to your point around duplicates, there's a set of validations that are done in this front end. So let me just quick aside. The blue swim lane is the receiving of your document and indexing the document. Green is the process for a PO-based invoice. Orange is the exception management that AP would do manually, and then red is your no PO-based invoice. So everything's going to go through this blue, and then it's either going to go through green or red, depending on if it's PO or no PO. And to your point, the validation of duplicates, there's 2 different steps. There's one, do we have that already booked in QAD? Has it already gone through the process? The second is the supplier just reminding us of something that we're already in process. So it's already in DocLib, but they're just, with the reminder, sending the invoice in case you forgot, sort of thing, So that we check that as well, just to ensure that we're not duplicating the process. So, yeah. Cool. So as far as this slide's concerned, I'm not going to go deep into we call these like individual things, circles, whatever, nodes in our tool. We call them nodes. But I'm not going to go into each node within this slide. I'm going to probably toggle between this as questions come up in the demo. So just want to jump onto that. And then, again, though, if you have more questions that you want to bring up, feel free. Let me see. I was excited because, knock on wood, usually a hotel wireless does not let my VPN connect, so I can't necessarily do demos every hotel, but this one did, so we're doing a demo. But if it drops, I'll ad-lib from there. Cool. Okay, so this is the home screen of DocLib when you first log in. This, some key dashboarding metrics that we look at that customers are interested in. I've been traveling for the past week, so I haven't done any demos in my environment here, but that's why the document activity is low. But the main one that people look at is this no-touch workflow. For my environment, it's pretty low as far as the quantity of workflows that I'm processing, because I'm usually only doing one per demo or so. But usually it's a percentage point, for customers, and that is, it runs through that swim lane fully without any manual intervention whatsoever. So there's no need. It goes through all the checks and balances. It's still checking, the three-way match, making sure that this is actually okay to pay. But 70 to 80% of invoices that our customers process through DocLib on average go through no touch. A lot of that is a progression, right? So day one of go live, I would not expect 70 to 80%. I would expect 50 to 60, on a bad day 40, but then you'll see with your reporting, okay, like what are the reasons that we're having these exceptions? Oftentimes that's either conversations with a supplier or a upstream business problem. So that a lot of times that's when people would go to iPurchase and look at, an approval workflow, or they would look at how are we running, our, receipt process, are we making sure that these are getting in properly in a timely manner? Are we including a packing slip number with that receipt so we can drive a better efficiency on the three-way match? There's things that you can do to increase that no-touch workflow processing percentage. But anyway, all that to say, on this home screen, typically what people look at, but the real robust reporting and where people spend a lot more of their time is in this reports tab. I'll just run sort of a wide open report to kind of give you a feel for what these look like. One of these days, I'm gonna have enough data in here where it takes too long to run it, I think, maybe, I don't know. But this is supposed to look like an Excel spreadsheet, just to kind of bring familiarity with your AP team, looking at this data. But you can cram as much as you want, really, around each workflow, the data that you have around each workflow, and its status, whether it's open or closed, what status it's in, the different data elements related to that workflow into this report. These reports are meant to be actionable. They're also, editable. So your team will absolutely be able to modify this. But each of these are hyperlinks. It'll bring you to the actual workflow associated with that invoice and give you more detail. And like I mentioned, you can come into the report writer here, and if I go to add a column, I've got all the metadata keywords, all the document properties, any data from QAD, any data from the workflow that I can report against and incorporate into that report. A lot of ways that people will leverage these reports, whether it be capturing a supplier discounted credit term, if you're able to prioritize which exceptions that you're managing, and use the actionability, if that's a word, from the report to work on those workflows. That's a big one. Looking at driving accountability around the approval process. If it hits in a certain elapsed time, waiting in someone's queue for waiting for approval, could that escalate to a manager? Or even an AP, this would be where you would completely eliminate those spreadsheets, the email inbox, or their head, of trying to keep track of these invoices. This would replace that. Huge for management as well. If you're looking at going into a negotiation with a supplier, or you're looking at how do we, do in this particular area of AP, instead of working with the accounting team directly and having that synchronous communication, this provides asynchronous communication around the AP process as a whole. And you've got the data there as opposed to the interpretation of that data from your accounting team. So that's the reporting side. Any questions on reporting or anything that I could further elaborate on? All right, cool. What do I do? Uh-oh. Okay. All right, workflows. So this is, you see in the top there, it says Pix Open Workflows. My username here is Pix. So this could be, Ryan's Open Workflows, Vanessa's Open Workflows. This is a queue of the exceptions that need to be managed by any particular user. The current node that you see there, that is what I was talking about earlier, where that was even an abbreviated version of our fuller workflow, but this gives you a feel for what's needed there. So, reviewing a duplicate, like was mentioned earlier, or geocoding or approvals. Every single one of these lines has an associated invoice number, and is it PO or no PO, and then what is the exception that we're managing. So that's is kind of where you would spend your time, as an AP user or as an approver, looking to work within an AP. So I'll jump over to an example here of a three-way match discrepancy. So as you can see, we got the document on the right-hand side here. We've got the header footer data on the left, and there's a simple discrepancy that's found with this particular document. So here we've got receiver number, this pulling in the receivers from QAD. We've got a PO price 119 on this part, and our voucher price of 100 up here. So it's driving a $19 discrepancy. Trailer charges, so freight, shipping, tax, things along those lines. How are those handled? This, is an example of automatic geocoding. So depending on how you run freight, oftentimes our customers will have one account that they want to book freight against. They'll have some thresholds of, okay, this is an acceptable amount of freight that we would expect to pay, and they would want that just automatically geocoded, off that invoice. So that way you're not driving an exception for something that's not an exception, like $8.33 of freight shouldn't drive, hey, this is an issue with this invoice. However, if you look at the totals, it's like, well, the PO is different than what we see on the invoice. So that's how we would manage sort of not having these trailer charges cause exceptions. Tax is a huge topic, for a lot of our customers in evaluating what to do with their tax that they're being charged in their invoice, and how to marry that against their QAD setups. In general, we look at global tax management, that module within QAD, to drive what to do with tax. However, depending on your setup and how thorough that setup is, there will be exceptions. There will be different cases where you need to sort of modify what you would see happen there. So we have full tax tables set up in DocLib for everything from golden tax in China, e-invoicing in EMEA and Latin America, VAT tax in EMEA, the sales tax, all those sorts of, variations. Everybody wants a piece, right? Every government wants a piece. So we handle that within DocLib and configure that, again, not to drive an exception. For this one, I'm going to route for approval just for the sake of a demo here. I'll route it to myself for approval so you can see what that looks like. Typically, this would be automatically routed for approval based off of an approval matrix that you have. If you have something set up in QAD, or if you have an approval matrix set up in iPurchase, typically it would mirror that approval process. Especially for a PO-based invoice, route to the buyer, or if it's a larger variance, it may need to go through a series of approvals. Much simpler than the purchasing side, but still important to note. So I'm just going to say, is this okay to pay?
Steven, I just want to confirm something you just said.
Yeah.
So if the purchase order does not have freight charge on it, the invoice comes in, it has a freight charge on it, typically that would be a discrepancy. But this is a configuration setting to say, don't consider that really a discrepancy. Auto GL code it and let it pass through.
That's right.
That's terrific because that's going to really drive up the no-touch rate.
Right, exactly. Yep. Yeah, and to that point, both on the discrepancies in the three-way match and in the freight, we have thresholds or parameters. So like if you have a penny difference, or even like it could be a percentage and dollar amount, a 10% or $100 variance in your three-way match, just process, right? We don't necessarily need AP looking at that. That's configurable by the user, and then same with freight is a big one. Go ahead.
Is that configuration able to be driven by supplier?
Yeah. You could kind of get a little bit out of hand with that, but yeah, if there are
General, like larger suppliers.
Yes.
And then you have some blanket rules for everyone else.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
And then you mentioned on the global tax management module in QAD is what you're using to determine if that tax field is acceptable or not acceptable, and that will route it to that node for taxable.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, it'll determine, is a supplier taxable? Are they set up in QAD as that? And then determine what sort of calculation we should have. What we would expect. Would there be a variance against that? And again, there's a variety of thoroughness that people have in their setups in QAD. So in order to work with that, we have a whole robust, basically tax module that's included in this within DocLib that we can configure on what we would expect. But best case scenario, and I forgot to mention this earlier, QAD is your system of record. We want to be the AP, the automation layer on top of that. We don't want to have two sources of truth. Like DocLib says one thing, QAD says another, right? We don't want that in any and all scenarios. So if we can just keep QAD as the system of record and the source of truth, we will, including with taxes. However, that might not be achievable in all circumstances. So we have that workaround. Yeah.
And then, sorry to...
I'll keep going.
But like in this instance, there was just a price mismatch between our original PO versus what came through on the invoice. You've updated that and set it for approval. You can also configure where those different variances get coded, correct?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. For this simple scenario, we just coded against the variance account. But and again, we could get, so our goal here is to make the complex simple. So like in this screen, it's relatively simple to manage that variance, but if you have a particular supplier for that account, or if there's different variance based off the domain that you're working in, you've got AP, there's a shared service working in different domains or entities, it can automate all that in the background and just let the AP user just sort of deal with the discrepancy, and then we'll book it based off of the configurations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Thanks for the questions. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this over. How are we looking on time? Good. For approval. I've got a number of other, scenarios here just to kind of give you a feel for what a typical queue could look like, as opposed to just having one line on here or something. The filtering, there's a few things I'll just comment on the queue. filtering can be filtered by any keyword, any status of an invoice, the user that you're waiting on. If you toggle, you can click on this like multiple person icon here and toggle into everyone's queue and then filter based off the user. So it's robust in the filtering side, helpful for somebody trying to look at a specific set of work that they're trying to accomplish. And then on the settings side, this is sending an email to you. So there's two main approaches that you can take to email notifications with this tool. One would be sending you an email every time something hits your queue. As you can imagine, somebody, a company processing 5,000 invoices a month with AP, say they're at 60%, no-touch workflow, or even 30% no-touch workflow, you're looking at maybe a dozen or so emails every day for the AP person. Can get a little out of hand. So the goal here, if my math is wrong, that's okay. Public math, right? But the goal here is to consolidate all of the work that you would have in that queue and send you like a daily email. Hyperlinked so that you can get into, we want to have the data-driven work, right? So we have a hyperlink to get you into all the details that you need to make a decision off of that workflow and move that along. So that's how you would configure this, in your settings for your workflow. So that's different than the reporting side, where like if you're looking to get a report on your department, if there's an issue or there's a lag, it's a little bit different. Is this our one? Yes. Okay. So this is our approval. Pretty similar view here, just a little bit less edits to be made. And one of the things I'll just highlight is you'll just see kind of a consolidated picture of what those variants look like at a line level, based off of the receiver number. Sorry, my Teams is blowing up here. I'm going to process this through. As promised, the last thing I wanted to show was actually showing in QAD. Anybody from QAD here? I'm going to pull up .NET and don't want to get in trouble. All right. So again, if this is not what your QAD environment looks like, can integrate to any version. So this is just the version that I have configured on my demo environment. And QAD is not responding. Give it a minute. Okay, what's the date today? 9/16. Okay, yeah, so here we've got that invoice that we just processed right here. I'll open it up, but so this is real time. We just created the transaction, as you saw. I hit this. This is okay to pay, and it created that transaction. I'll click into this transaction so you can take a look at it. And just to comment right up front, this transaction's created using QAD supported software. So everything that we do is above the belt with QAD. There's financial API for the EE version that you're seeing here, Q extends for previous versions, and then the integration platform that they're coming out with 03 in conversations with Tony Winters and the team at QAD to have that ported, the DocLib ported to that version prior to general availability. So that's a part of the relationship that we share with QAD and being the recommended solution. But you have the confidence that this is all the internal controls that QAD would have as an application in creating these transactions. They're met with how DocLib's creating those transactions. And you can see pretty easily, DL, DocLib, PO-based invoice is okay to pay. So it went through the entire process. One thing as you're talking to your AP team, or if you're in an AP team yourself, we're not going through and automating payment as a part of this either. So you have the control over your cash flow. We're not just automatically sending, money out the door every time a transaction is created. You have, the payment run to handle. And like you mentioned earlier, we've got the variance account of that $19 variance, and then the freight allocation. And, it's just as if someone came in here manually, created that posting. So that is a very high level overview and breakdown of some of the core things that customers look at, of QAD look at for automating AP. For more resources on this, I already mentioned there's our, I can find my clicker or my mouse. There we go. I already mentioned our YouTube channel and the customer case studies that we have there. On our website, we've got, we have the QAD Customer Podcast, bunch of interviews that we've done with various QAD customers, not just related to DocLib. It's not always a sales pitch on that podcast, but helps kind of get a lay of the land when it comes to AP. And then you can also look at booking a demo with us on the website. I am the demoer today, or, in the future as well. So if you have more questions or you want to go through that, book a demo in there, and I'll be on there. So, what other questions do we got? Anything else?
I have a comment, not a question. I want to stress the importance of the real-time integration. Okay? It's very, very important. The ISS group has, as you know, sold and implemented other AP automation solutions in the past. We now sell DocLib, as you know, and one of the primary reasons is the real-time integration. The fact that an invoice sometimes can show up before the receipt, and that will place the invoice on hold. And the fact that when a receipt comes into QAD, it's your real-time entry. You pick that receipt right up and don't wait for the next batch is very important. The discrepancies we were talking about, sometimes I've had clients saying, I want the buyer to modify the purchase order. So the invoice comes in different than the purchase order, and the resolution is the buyer has to make a change order to the PO in QAD, okay? And so they go ahead and do that, and once again, because it's real-time integrated, you now can do that reconciliation without waiting for the next batch.
Yeah.
So that real-time integration is very important.
Yeah.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, I will somehow make these slides available to you guys. I'll talk with Jeff or Gary about that. But thanks again for joining today. Hopefully I didn't put anybody to sleep, but if not, I hope you enjoyed your nap. So, all right, thanks again, guys.